Yes, it worked. It worked. My idea worked.
Okay, I think the recording is starting, Jacob. If you could just give a summary of what we did last week to get everyone synced, and then introduce the agenda for this week.
Sure. Last week we talked about, well, over the last couple of weeks, I should say, we've talked about creating models in Blender, which is a free open source 3D graphics editing tool. And we learned how to import models from Blender into Unity. Very easy. You just you find the assets folder in your file system for your Unity project and save the .blend file in that folder. And then Unity takes care of the rest. I'm seeing a couple messages in the chat. I will be posting our example project. I think, John, if you could send me what I need to know to post this on the wiki.
Sure.
That would be great. I can handle that later this afternoon.
Okay.
For the time being, hopefully, even if you don't have all of the latest stuff for this project, for what we've done so far, we'll be able to follow along with what we're doing today. So, Blender models. We talked about having collectible objects. So when you hit them, they disappear, and we can play a sound effect, and we can make a score increment. And we do that by, for those of you that were here, you'll recall we do that by adding a script and using the Ontriggerenter function. And so when we enter the trigger, that's when the code runs, and the object is deactivated so that it disappears. And we do anything else that we want to do, like play a sound effect or increase the score. And we'll look at that script again just to review here in a second.
And Jacob, excuse me for interrupting. If anyone has made any progress over the week and they like to show off their rolling ball game to David and I don't know who else hasn't been here for a couple of weeks, just so they can see the progress that Peter's made. And yeah, Mayuri, I'm sure would like to see that too. I'm not sure Mayuri was.
So I see Peter has his hand up. Peter, is that a volunteer to share?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to pass you the ball, Peter. I'm going to try to pass you the ball. There we go.
Okay.
Explain your code, Peter. Your chance to show off and teach everyone else what you learned. Explain the most useful things you learned from Jacob.
It's not. I didn't program any more code. I just worked on the level design.
Very cool.
All right. Here we go.
Before you run it, explain your vision and your strategy and
that's it for the level design
Very
so far.
cool.
I want to make a rolling. I want to make a big jump thing, where you gain a lot of speed. I'm gonna add obstacles and stuff while you're rolling, and then you gain a lot of speed and then you go off this jump, and then you land on these.
Kind of like a 3D platform game, no?
Right.
Fantastic.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Can you explain one or two bits of the code that you think are particularly useful that David and Mayuri and Travis might find interesting?
I didn't really have to code it to get the level design.
Well, I have a suggestion, Peter. Could you explain the script that we have on the camera? Could you show that and explain what's going on there? That's the last thing that we learned last time is how to have the camera follow the I guess in this case the ball that you're controlling.
I can try. Okay. So how I think this works is the camera, you need to make sure the camera always stays X distance and Y distance away from the ball at all times, so that when the ball rolls around, it'll still stay at like 7.5 Y away from the ball. So you don't have to put like the character movement on the camera. I tried that before we learned how to do this, and it just messed it up. That's basically how I think it works.
So David asks in the chat, so is the camera always transforming to a new location even if it's just standing still? And the answer is, if I understand your question correctly, it sort of is, because that update function is called once every frame, and that update function is sort of, even if it's still in the same position, it's sort of reassigning that position. And so you might say, yeah, exactly. So you might say, well, does that seem kind of inefficient? You could say that, but each one of those lines of code takes just a milliseconds to run. It's very, very fast. So it's in this case, I think it's well worth just leaving it that way to keep the code simple. Okay. Yeah, in just about every programming project you'll ever have, there's always a balance between making it as efficient as possible and have it run as fast as possible versus developing it as fast as possible and having the code be easy to read and easy to maintain. So those two things are always, oftentimes, it's oftentimes a situation where you have to kind of make trade-offs. Peter, could I have the ball back real quick? Great, thank you. Peter, you have a question? Or is that a...
I forgot to lower my hand, sorry.
Okay, all right, cool. Okay, so on the docket for today, we're going to review the process of having a collectible item. We're going to take another quick look at the camera script and look at a way that we can improve it. And then we're going to move on to some other ways. We've used a trigger to have the collectible object. We're going to look at some other ways to use triggers. We're going to learn how to do a skybox. I remember that was a question we had last week, so we're going to talk about the skybox. And then if there's time, and hopefully there will be, we'll look at, we'll start looking at the Unity tutorials on making a GUI or a GUI. That's our graphical user interface. So that will really help us put the finishing touches on our game. Okay, so I will share clear my desktop here. And here's Unity. I have a project here, and if you'll notice, some of the things in my project are not totally well organized or well named. So I'm going to take a second. Just a reminder, for, some of you might have missed this trick. We can organize our hierarchy by creating an empty game object. I'm going to rename it this one walls. And so I have a couple different walls here. I'm going to have a bunch more by the time I'm done with my level. So I'm going to keep them organized, I'm going to just keep all of them under the walls game object. So it's sort of like having a folder structure, like the way you keep all your files organized, or the way you should keep all your files organized. And I can do the same thing with the little planes that I'm using for the floor or the ground. And if I had a really big project, I may want to give more descriptive names to each of these planes too. Okay, so let's review. Actually, let's start out by reviewing the camera script, and we're going to look at a way to improve the camera script that we wrote last week. Okay, so here it is, and what we did last week was very simple. And in our update function, what we did is we looked at our scene. We kind of put our camera where we wanted it, and we took a look at the position of our camera compared to the position of the ball. And so we measured that distance, so we can see the difference in the z direction is negative 14.5. The difference in the y direction is 4.5. And so we added those numbers to our update function, like so. Okay, now there's a difficulty here, is that what if I want to change the position of my camera? Okay, so let's say I want my camera to back up a little bit, maybe go a little higher. Okay, well, now the position has changed, and this might actually not look too bad. Well, of course, it's not going to look any different because I'm moving my camera. I'm immediately moving my camera right back to where it was. Okay, so in order to kind of change the position of my camera the way I want to, I would have to go back into my script and change these numbers. Yeah. So, does someone have a suggestion? How do you suppose we could fix this problem? Is there a better way to do this? Do we have a suggestion? Going once, going twice. Okay, here's what we're going to do. At the very beginning, at the very start, we're going to detect what this distance is. Okay? And we'll store those distances in a variable. And then in variables, we have x, y, and z, all three of those. So we'll store those distances in variables, and then we'll use those variables to update the position. Okay, so see how this works. Okay, we'll make we'll just call them x, y, and z. These are going to be floats, which are, again, our decimal numbers. Okay, so there's three variables. They don't have any value yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set their value in the start function. The start function is called once at the very beginning of your scene. Okay, so at the beginning, I can say x equals, and what is this going to equal? Well, it's going to be the difference in the x position between the camera and the player. And the player, if you'll recall, we're setting that's a public variable that we set in our inspector tab. So in our inspector, if you look at the inspector tab, we have the player object. Actually, you can see X, Y, and Z there now. The player, you can change which object that's going to follow. We have it set to be our player. You can also click and drag from over here. Okay. So I want this to be the difference between the ball, the player, and the player's X position and the camera's X position. So I can get the player's X position with player.transform.position.x. And then the object's own position is just transform.position.x. Okay. And we can do the same thing with Y. And Z. Okay, now it looks like I have these in kind of a weird order. We're going to go X, Y, Z. Y. Z. Now let's try that. Let's see, did I do that backwards? Yep, I did that backwards. There we go. And there we are. And you'll notice that if I move my camera, make it kind of off center here just for demonstration purposes, it stays. And as I move my ball around, the camera tracks. Okay. And there you have it. A camera script that is easier to work with than just the simple one that we put together last week. Any questions on? Yep, we certainly can. There you go. And that, and remember, to get that script to work, you will need to add it. Yeah, you may need to adjust kind of the white space. The white space may not copy and paste correctly from the chat window. You will need to add that your script to your main camera object. And then you will need to set the player object right there. And actually, these X, Y, and Z, we may want to make private using the private keyword right there. And that's so that they don't show up here. So it wouldn't really, we don't really want those to, unless you, well, maybe you want them to show up in the inspector tab over here. But for me, I didn't really care to, so I set each of these variables to be private. Okay. As opposed to public, which means it's accessible to everything else too. Okay. I need to do a little bit of cleanup. Okay, well there's a script we're going to look at later, but I'm to keep things organized, I'm going to make sure I move that script into my scripts folder. And there I have all the scripts that we've used so far. Okay. Next topic, review of how we did this collectible object. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, if I play my scene, you can see that when I roll ahead, I can collect that object. Okay. How are we doing that? We're doing that. The couple things that need to happen in order to make the collectible object happen. Okay. First is a script. Okay, and in my scripts, this is some code that we added to the player controller script, which we were also using for movement. We added a function to this in this script called Ontriggerenter. And Ontriggerenter is, again, it's that magic function that happens when this object collides with a trigger. Triggers do not have any effect on your physics. They don't stop your movement. You don't bounce off of them. You pass through the trigger. When you pass through the trigger, it calls Ontriggerenter. And you get a parameter for this function that is of type collider. And useful for our purposes, the collider has a property called GameObject, which is the game object that you collided with. Just for fun, let's look at the other stuff that the collider object has. We can right-click and examine it in our browser. And here we can see there's a collider, and it shows some of the different. Actually, not seeing the. Expecting to see the game object there. I don't actually see it on this list. Oh, okay. Well, we'll take a different opportunity to explore the browser there. We're missing something there. In any case, we can use the game object property of our collider object. So our collider object is named other, and so I do other.gameObject to get the game object property, and then I get the tag property of that game object. And we check to see if the tag is pickup. Okay. Now, when will it? How do we determine what the tag is? If we select our object in the scene, in the Inspector tab, we can give it a tag. Okay, and there's a few that are created by default. If you want to add a new one, you click Add New Tag, and you can make it, whatever you want. And then if you want to change that tag, you can make that tag, whatever you want. Now I made a tag that's called pickup for our collectible object. Could have also said collectible, I suppose. And so in this script now, if we see that the object we've collided with has the tag pickup, we're going to do three things. We're going to deactivate it, we're going to increase the score, and we're going to play a sound effect. We won't go too in-depth into the sound effect stuff right now. We'll, if you missed that webcast, we can talk about that later. The reason I wanted to review this is because we're going to use now a different triggers for a different reason. And that reason is we're going to use a trigger to detect when you have fallen off the stage. You don't want to fall, right now in your projects. If you fall off the stage, you're probably just falling down forever, and you have to stop the game entirely and restart it in order to get back to the start. We can use a trigger to detect, when you have fallen off the stage, and it can, do something. In my case, I'm just having it reset my position to the very beginning. Okay. So let's have a look at how I'm doing that, and then we will take a pause and let you guys implement this trigger as well. That will let you respawn at the beginning if you fall off. Okay. So what I have done, and you don't see it right now because it's invisible, but I added. I just went to Game Object and Create Other, and I'll just do it again. For demonstration purposes, I'll deactivate that now. So I created a cube, and I'm going to position this cube kind of below my level, and I'm going to scale it out so it covers the whole space below my level. I may need to make it bigger, or I may want to make it smaller if I, later on. And to make this cube that I just added into a trigger, I'm going to go to its box collider and check is trigger. Now it's a trigger. Great. I also want to give it a tag, and I already created a tag which I call death trigger. The idea being that if you run into a trigger that has tag death trigger, that means your character is going to respawn back at the beginning. Okay, so let's look at the script that we need to use in order to have the death trigger work. And I have this script that I call respawn, and I'll open this up so we can take a look. Okay, so you recall the strategy that we used a few minutes ago for the camera, where we measured. We measured at the very beginning. We measured a distance, or we measured 3 different distances actually, and used those distances later on. So that way we didn't have to hard code the position into our script. Using a similar strategy right here. I have a variable called start position. The start position is is an object of type vector3. Okay, now what is a vector3? You can think of it as just three numbers put together. It'll be x, y, and z. Okay, so if we inspect, I go to definition, and we look at vector3. You can see here are all the properties of the vector3 object type. Okay. Some of this stuff, if you've had any, I don't know if any of you guys are at the point in school where you've had physics or linear algebra, or you may have seen a little bit of this in like pre-calculus, where you have things like cross products, dot products, vector, adding vectors, subtracting vectors, that kind of thing. So you can see there are some built-in methods that do that sort of stuff. We're not going to have any use for that today. You can see if you want to get just the x, y, or z values from your vector, there are x, y, and z properties. So if I wanted to see my vector 3's x position, I would just do start position dot x, and you can see MonoDevelop kind of does that little autocomplete for me. It shows me what my options are, or y or z. Okay. Now the reason why I'm using a vector 3 is because it lets me assign all 3 position values all at once. So my transform, and really I don't need to say this. I can just use transform.position. It's the same thing. That this dot is assumed in Unity. Okay, this meaning the object that has this script is this. So this dot transform.position is setting equal to, or I'm sorry, taking the start position and setting it equal to this dot transform.position. So what is that doing? It's taking the position of this object at this game object at the very beginning and saving it at this variable. Okay, so start position is going to be the vector 3 of our starting position. So we're saving that because when we collide with a trigger that has tag death trigger, I want to reset my position back to that start position. And then 2 other things that I'm going to do, and actually I'll show you why. I'll first comment these out so they don't happen. Okay, so we'll go and I will roll off, and you'll see when I collide with this trigger, it resets me to the top. And you see I kept rolling, which was not exactly what I wanted to have happen. Now, if we look at the start position here, I didn't make it a private variable, at least not yet. Here, let's open that and click in my game window so I can move. You see that that gets set to 0.5 and 0. I don't have that set, in my script. I'm just setting that right here. The ball is starting at 0.5 and 0. And in fact, I can move my ball, somewhere else, and we can start again, and you can see the start position is set differently. Okay, but we don't want the ball, well, maybe you do, but most of the time we don't want the ball to keep rolling like that when we fall off and respawn. So what I'm doing is I'm setting the velocity to 0, and actually we can just say vector 3.0 to say that's just a vector of 3 zeros. Velocity, position, and velocity are both vector 3's. Position is your position, x, y, and z. Velocity is how fast you're moving in the x direction, how fast you're moving in the y direction, how fast you're moving in the z direction. We also have angular velocity, which is how fast are you spinning in the x direction, or spinning in the y direction, or spinning in the z direction. And so I'm setting the velocity and the angular velocity both to 0, so we are no longer moving and we're no longer spinning. We're just stopped. And so with those in place, I fall off, and I'm no longer, now I'm stationary, which is what we want. And I'm going to go ahead and drag that script into my scripts folder to keep it organized. Oh, lost it. I will pull that back up. And I will put this in the chat window so you can see. Okay. One more step I'm going to take is that I don't want this big ugly box, in my scene. So I'm going to uncheck the mesh renderer. I have that object selected. I'm going to uncheck the mesh renderer. So it's not going to render. It's going to be invisible. And it can still be used as a trigger. You just won't see it. Invisible trigger. There you go. And there you have it. Your way to not fall down infinitely. As long as you make, as long as you have this coverage, over the course of your entire level. Now, this is not the only way to accomplish this. Another way to accomplish the same thing would be to have a script that would check for, say, the Y position of your ball, and if the Y position of your ball dropped below a certain point, then respawn. Okay, you could do that too. More than one way to skin a cat. I think this is a good practice for us, though, to get used to using triggers. It's a good application of triggers. And notice too, so we'll take a little break from a lot of new information, so we'll give you guys a chance to get that trigger working in your project. Notice too that I have two scripts here. Now I have the player controller script and the respawn script, both on the same game object. So over here you can see here's my player controller, here's my respawn script. They're both on there, and both of them have an Ontriggerenter function. Okay, that's okay. It's okay that they both of these functions are going to get called. So that's absolutely fine that we have multiple Ontriggerenter functions for the same object. In fact, something that we may want to do before we call this game finished is to keep things organized. We may want to make a separate script. We kind of this player controller script right now is kind of doing double duty. It's controlling movement in our fixed update function, and it's dealing with collectible objects in the Ontriggerenter function here. We may want to split this up into two different scripts so that each script just has one responsibility. That's generally a good general design principle for your programming projects is what we call separation of concerns, or give each thing its own responsibility so that you can update components separately. It's like modular building. We'll give you guys just a minute to get caught up here. Go ahead and raise your hand if you are finished with your trigger. I'll give you guys a couple minutes. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on for now. If you're not quite caught up, that's okay. There'll be time later on. Let's go ahead and talk about skyboxes. You see, I already have a skybox in my scene here. Skyboxes are pretty easy. Well, I should say they may be difficult to create if you're creating one from scratch. But if you have one, or if you found one that you like in the Unity Asset Store, I found this package that was one of the free Skybox packages. To find a bunch of Skyboxes in the Asset Store, go to under Textures and Materials. You can go down to Skies, and many of these are paid, but there are a decent amount that are free. I can sort by price, and there's just a handful, but they're pretty cool. Certainly good enough to get you started. So once you have downloaded your Skybox, the way to add it to your scene is to go to Edit, Render Settings. So Edit, Render Settings, and we have actually a whole bunch of different options here. The one we're worried about right now is Skybox Material. So go to Skybox Material, and you can use any material that you have in your project. You know, right now I have just the red one that I'm using for my ball. I have the funny sand thing. Now it's not designed to be a skybox, so that's going to look kind of weird. But that's the sand that I used for the ground here. And then here are some of the Skybox materials that I downloaded. That's pretty cool. You just select that material, and there you go. Got Skybox. Pretty neat. If you're interested, I'm not a fantastic artist, so you know, creating skyboxes from scratch is not something that we're going to cover. But if you look, for example, at the package that I downloaded, you can look at the textures that come with the material. First, let's look at the material. Here's the one we're using right now. Actually, let's take a look at this one. This one's a little easier to see. You can see that the shader that they're using is Skybox shader. And what happened to my inspector tab? Oh, there we go. Okay. Not sure what I did. You can see with the mobile Skybox shader, the situation is that you add 6 different textures. You have a front, a back, a left, a right, an up, and I should say down. And so Skybox is just that. It's a box with 6 sides. So the Unity, the Unity scene here is really inside a box, and you could see that very clearly. You could see that very clearly when I went with one of the, one of these materials that's not meant to be a skybox. You can see that the Unity world is actually a box. And so, I'm going to change that back. And so when you look at these materials, they have 6 different textures, one for each side of the box. And so that's and you can see here a little preview of each of those pictures. Okay, there's the top and the bottom, and then each side. So if you are so inclined to be an artist and draw your own skybox, you know, I'm sure there are tutorials online you can find. That's the basic concept, is that you just make the 6 sides of a box, make the inside of a box. Okay. Peter, you have a question?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to put my hand down again.
Okay, no, that's fine. All right. Travis, thanks. See you next time. Okay, last topic for today is going to be the GUI or GUI. I think the easiest way to learn about our GUI is to look at the fantastic, you know, some of the fantastic documentation and tutorials that are on the Unity website. And you can see here, again, you can go to this Learn tab on the Unity website for all manner of little introductions to different parts of Unity. Obviously, we're scratching the surface here with what we're doing. So there's just a ton of stuff you can do, a ton of cool stuff you can do. So as this page explains, there's another one of those magic function names called onGUI, and onGUI, it's called every frame, and says just like the update function, and the onGUI function handles all the rendering of the GUI. So here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to use this whole function. I'm just going to copy that and go back into Unity. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new scene. Okay, right now I only have one scene in my project. I'm going to create a new scene. So you think of scenes like levels. Okay. So I have a new scene, and I'm going to add a script, and I will go ahead and actually, I'm just going to add it to the main camera for now. I'm going to call this splash screen GUI. This is going to, this script is going to handle what we call the splash screen. Okay, and let's go ahead and, so there's my onGUI function. Let's go ahead and play this scene and see what happens. Okay, now look at what happened. Okay, we've got a box, and we've got some text in the box, and we have a couple buttons. All right, pretty cool. Now, how do we change the style of what's going on here? Well, take a closer look at the code that we just pasted in from that example that we found online. Okay. GUI.box, here is the function that was called. Okay. And that GUI.box created this big box. And we can see the first parameter is a rectangle, or a rect, with 4 values. And those 4 values, let's go ahead and go to definition. Let's see, did that give me? Well, that got me to the definition of GUI. I wanted the definition of rect. Oh, it's giving me box. Can I get right there? We go. Rect. Okay. Oh, it's not. Something's wrong. It's not giving me the description. Let's look at this online. We're going to go to the Unity. We can go to the documentation, scripting reference, and we can see if we can find rect. There we go. So this will help us understand what. Again, if you see anything in the code that you don't understand, you can go to the scripting reference and find an explanation. So what is this rect with all these 4 numbers? Okay. So this will tell us that first of all, a 2D rectangle defined by x, y position, and width, height. Okay, so that should give you a hint already of what's going on here. And in fact, that will be the case. These are the x and y coordinates on the screen of the top left corner, and then you have the width and height of the box. And let's go ahead and keep reading to confirm that. It says there's a second way to specify the rectangle, but I'm pretty sure we're using the first way. What I'm going to look at is the constructor. Okay, constructor is what's happening here. Okay, we're creating a new, rect is the name of the object, and so sometimes you'll just see the name of the object and then parentheses with the parameters, and that's what we call a constructor. Creates a new rect. And you can see here it doesn't give you a whole lot of explanation, but it does say that this is the first float is left, the second is top, the third parameter is width, and the fourth parameter is height, and they're all of type float. So that is the case. It's the x position, the y position, the width, and the height. Okay, so if we want to push, here's what it looks like right now. If we want to push it down a little bit, the second value is the y position from the top of the screen. So I can make that say 50, and that should push it down a little bit from where it once was. Okay, sure enough. Notice the buttons didn't change position. So I may want to add, I may have to add a little bit to these buttons to get them to work the way I want. And notice the buttons also use the rect object with the constructor. Okay. There we go. And what we don't have time to quite have time to look at today, but we will get to next time, is how to put images. And so already you know enough that you could, if you wanted to, make a big splash screen across that kind of fills up your screen here. And you have buttons. You know how to make a button, or you can see how to make a button from that example script. And what we'll look at next time is how to put in images and how to do some more detailed styling of our GUI, which is going to be pretty cool. There are even some resources that you can download from the asset store to help make your GUI look really cool. And then we'll learn how to wire up these buttons so that these buttons do stuff.
Great. Jacob, thank you. To be continued. Next week we were, besides the task that Jacob just suggested, like to document all of this on our wiki. So I'll start that process by sending an email around the horn where our wiki is. Maybe you can each post your games on the wiki, and we can have access to everybody's scripts. Just wanted to give you all a heads up. After we finish this game, Jacob, we thought we would, last week we talked about starting a series of workshops on mobile application development. Do you like to give a 1-minute summary of where we could go there? What kind of projects we'd like to do, game of the month, project of the month, maybe a timer?
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely been some interest from some interns into making. Of course, we're making games here, and these are games that the community can be ported to a mobile device. But I guess there's been some interest in just making apps, just general apps for mobile devices. And so there's a bunch of different directions we could go with that project. I think it's a fun project. I'm excited about it. There's a few different directions we can go. John made some suggestions of, well, we could have a sort of a joke of the month or a project of the month or something like that app that would give you, send you a notification with the joke of the day or something. That would be kind of fun. We could start to look at something like a Build It Blocks app, where it's an app that would display your Build It blocks from the website. So something, and we can. Those are just a couple ideas. We're certainly open to ideas from anyone else who wants to join, brainstorm. A lot of different directions we can go with that project.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. All right, guys, have a good week. Mayuri, can you stay on the line just for a few minutes? I'd like to chat briefly about next projects, next meeting. Peter, thanks for showing off your work. David, I hope next week we could, if you have some time during the week, share your project, and also would love to hear about some of the music projects you're working on. Still in the back of my mind is getting back to the digital music course that Jacob and Aditi started. All right, guys.
John?
Yes.
Do you think you could email me the recording file too? Because I don't know about anybody else, but it's kind of hard for me to like watch it and then do it afterwards.
Got it. I'll send everybody a link to where all of the Unity webcasts are archived.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay. Bye, Peter. Bye, David. Jacob, thank you. I really love listening to you teach. You're the man.
Well, thank you, David and Peter and Mayuri for joining.
Great. Have a good week.
So, John, just wanted to let you know on